There he is.
Good morning.
Look at you, Kurt Doolittle himself. Happy Wednesday, sir.
It's such a pleasure to see you today.
It's always my pleasure. And my air conditioner is busted on my shop, and I'm out of my coat because it's too warm. But I have coffee, and I see you're wearing a lovely coat yourself.
Yeah, I thought I was going to mess you today, and now you show up without a jacket on.
It's true, you can't win, brother.
You can't win at all.
There's no winning. There's 3 rules in life that I discovered when I was in business. Number 1, you cannot win. Number 2, no good deed goes unpunished. And number 3, you don't have to like it.
No,
It's okay.
it's there's some serious holes in our law that we know about, but some of the subtle ones is they've removed all incentive to do the right thing up front and instead to cover your ass. And so like if you go into court and you say, yeah, we screwed up, yeah, it doesn't mean you're going to get less of a kick. I mean, what you should do is go to court and say, yeah, we screwed up, we understood this, whatever, but we made this mistake. That should be a huge change, and it's not. And so when you say you can't win, well, you can, because I have. The answer is, can you do it on terms which you feel are moral and ethical? That's getting increasingly difficult unless you're a small and medium business.
That's it. And it's like, this goes to my issue with dealing with patients, because the patients and me have too many intermediary corporate interests.
Yes.
And it's like, it becomes increasingly less ethical for me to participate in this system.
Right, because the system's intrinsically unethical.
I'm approaching the limit, and it's like it's interesting because it's not that I don't like working for the people who are like the CEO of the hospital. I like the guy. It's that I don't like working for companies that employ people like him.
Well, I mean, it's that somebody sent me a wonderful graph. I don't know if it was probably Ryan, which is we're watching where prices are going up and down, and the prices of things that are going up are all things subsidized by the government, and the prices of things that aren't being subsidized by the government are going down. Well, of course, medical care is one of them, which is why I'm like, well, we have to restore responsibility to those things that can be subsidized, and that'll go away. But I mean, on the other hand, I want to restore responsibility to doctors.
Right.
And the only way to do that is to shift the incentive for people to go into the very profitable positions of rent seeking out of those, so they will go into the very profitable and socially beneficial disciplines like medicine. We don't need more people gambling with other people's finances. We don't need more people in the credentialed elite trying to demonstrate they have intrinsic value. What we need, of course, is people providing services to people who need them and want to pay for them, or at least pay a subsidized value, some portion of a subsidized value for them. Again, Singapore seems to solve this, which has been it's really the Chicago school, despite that they get dumped on by everyone there.
Whoa, what's that?
You really have the
Okay. I'm
how do I say this?
braced.
You have the Austrian school.
Yes, sir.
The Austrian school consists of a Christian wing and a Jewish wing. The Jewish wing is Mises and Rothbard, and they're basically saying stuff that's reducible, I want to be able to free ride on others' productivity. Okay, fine.
Okay.
However, the other side of the school is the Hayekian Mengerian school, which is Christian. And it says, well, I mean, there's capital everywhere, and we're trying to discover social science. And so now that's different, which is if you follow rule of law, then things will just ordinarily work out to support incentives. Right. So what's happened, of course, is like the liberals stole the people who liberals stole liberal, which is a conservative term, right? And the Jewish Austrians stole the Austrian term, right? And then we get into the Chicago school, which is pretty classical liberal in the sense that how do we ameliorate changes in the economy by ensuring people so that they have enough flexibility in times of crisis to adapt. And then in other words, they're trying to preserve incentives. So the Austrian schools were trying to understand incentives. The Chicago school to compensate for incentives. And the freshwater or New York or Jewish school is to the purpose of which is to abuse incentives. All right. And so what
That's
we
New
live
York.
under, of course, is the abuse of incentives.
Wait, please repeat that.
Which part?
The last bit, something about the abuse of incentives.
The New York, what we call the New York. So it's freshwater, Chicago.
Right.
Saltwater, New York, mainstream, New York, DC.
Yep.
And and so what you still have is this Christian European tendency to treat it as a commons, right? To maintain rule of law in the commons, and the Jewish libertarian and the Jewish
Saltwaters.
essentially communist saltwater on the outsides trying to do the opposite. And so when I tell you, well, the Misesian or Rothbardian economics are reducible to, hey, I want to be able to profit from money. I'm like, money's a commons. You're welcome to benefit from assets, but you don't have any right to appreciate the appreciation or the stability of a price of $1 than you had to do over any other.
This goes to the very most upsetting thing I learned in the 21st century, which was what $1 really was. And I still harbor a grudge at my college for not teaching me what it is.
$1 is a share in the United States economy that we use, that's issued by the government as a system of trade. And that share is a commodity like any other commodities. The difference is, like as in many cases, the government tries to regulate the price of the commodity by increasing or decreasing supply so that it maintains a stable enough purchasing power for people to make imputations, which is to be able to predict cooperation in a diverse distribution of a production cycle across many people. So that's why you want to live in America, is because they're trying as hard as they can to make complex production cycles possible across people by maximizing their ability to predict. What's the other side doing? Just the fucking opposite, right? So they're trying to make it, they're trying to, anyway. So that's well,
no, I don't want you to gloss over this. I want you to what's the other side doing? They appear to be front running.
They're trying to maximize consumption regardless of externalities. So what's happening is instead of more continuous growth and small adaptations, we have rapid boom and bust cycles with crashes. And so the argument that they make is, yes, but this volatility still moves us forward. I'm like, but that doesn't mean the volatility at a lower frequency, in other words, more adjustments wouldn't move us forward better. And secondly, we don't. It's a fake economic statement, economic logic, because the purpose of economic logic is to account for the seen and unseen and to measure the difference. Well, we can't until we know what those differences are, we can't measure them. But it's pretty hard to say that kicking what we call kicking the can down the road, which they used to laugh at us. I mean, in other words, the mainstream used to laugh at those of us who were in the Austrian and freshwater camps and saying that, well, that's just a mythology. It's not a fucking myth. Why do you think economists stopped talking in 2008? You don't hear about talking anymore. You used to be, up until 2008, economists are blabbering like they were the oracles at Delphi, competing for who's going to be the next oracle at Delphi, and they shut up. Why? Because they're done.
What's that mean? They're done.
The theory failed. The Austrian argument is
there is no theory. There's no theory.
No, there absolutely is a theory. There absolutely is a theory.
Oh,
and the theory makes sense. The problem is it's idealistic and it doesn't fully account for costs. Now, it doesn't account for AB scenarios, which is what you can't account for what you don't know could have happened, right? But the second thing is they don't measure balance sheet statements. Well, if you measure the balance sheet according to Hayekian commons, which would mean that we have to measure things like bowling alone, right? The cost to us has been horrific. Most costs have been horrific. If you had to price the cost to the American middle working and laboring classes of the post-war attempt, or at least the post 60s attempt to bring the rest of the world up out of ignorance and poverty, it's been hugely costly. So you can only decide upon what you can measure. So that's what's always bothered me about mainstream economists, is that they're acting essentially on faith, that they're a false promise of endless growth, that endless growth will always provide an equal opportunity increase for the distribution of people who are employable. The consumption won't run out of we've actually run out of shit to consume, so consumption will run out. Eventually what you end up with is where we are now, is the only thing left to buy is a signal, a virtue signal, because there's nothing else you can literally own that makes a difference in life. I mean, one of the things we've learned during the COVID is how much less we need to be happy. And so all of these things. Now, my primary concern is, of course, the Hayekian insight that norms, traditions, values, that metaphysical presumptions, all of it is the things we don't consider assets. Those things are assets, and it turns out that high trust is an asset. And not only is it the most important asset, but it's the most costly one to produce, because you got to drive responsibility way down into freaking children to make it happen. And that's work. It's expensive. It's costly. And so when I look at current economists, I'm like, well, I mean, even current economists have sort of given up on the 2008, because they got corrected there. Even current economics today is in politics, they don't account for the balance sheet. So I'm interested in that, but it doesn't mean that this other stuff that's going on isn't still ridiculous, which is this attempt to predict this false promise of endless growth, that humans are fungible, or in other words, we're infinitely malleable. We're not. That we're malleable across time. We're not. And that there aren't hard numbers to human ability to adapt. There are, and so and that the most painful one that nobody wants to talk about, and I have to, because I'm one of the only people that does, is because what happens is that you're redistributing reproduction downward whenever you're taxing people to push income downward. And whenever you do that, I mean, it's different to insure people against hardship. It's another thing to fund people's reproductive dystonia.
Yes.
And so the problem is you're increasing the size of the underclasses. Well, I mean, the whole struggle for all of humanity is to reduce the size of the underclass. I mean, the Europeans and the East Asians did it, and nobody else could. And you wonder why our IQs are higher. That's all. It's not like we're special.
I have to slow you down, man.
Sorry.
You're all right. You're on a rip. You're on a rip and a tear. And it's like this.
It's just
I
upsetting.
want to riff off of it a little bit because it's like this. The people who are pushing the consumption down into the lower classes are the same people who are generating the bubbles and front running the bubbles they generate and taking the money and by financialization,
Correct.
which have siphoned off, by my calculation, some $360 trillion since 1972.
I don't know the number, but that doesn't sound out of line to me.
I looked at the way I calculated this. I see that the
1970.
1972, and I pulled two graphs up. One showed the GDP, and one showed the growth rate of GDP compared to, or productivity versus labor costs. And labor costs have essentially they've gained 15% over the period. And the productivity of labor has increased remarkably over the period. And it's like they siphoned off the difference. And I calculated the increase in productivity since 1973 and half of it.
Yeah, I'm trying to falsify that, and I'm going to look at how many trillion per year is it possible to extract from this economy. I can't get to 300 since 1973. Well, let's just pick 70, 80,
50 years.
That's, well, fuck yeah, you could get, you easily get to 200. So I mean,
it's like after 100, I mean, it's
well, no, I mean, it's
put it
this way, it's not less than 100 because it can't, for what, if I just do it on a napkin, like in my head right now, well, it's on average, it's because I'm not doing it the way you are. I'm not doing it by these gross numbers. I'm doing it by over time, how much is it possible to extract from this economy by the means available to them? And I'm just roughly adding up, the different kinds of interest and speculation and transfers and socialization of losses, et cetera. And I'm like, well, it's not less than 2 trillion a year, right? Which is, our federal budget says 3.5, but it's really 4.5, right? We inflate it away or whatever, tax the world for it. But if you brought down to what's extracted, it's absolutely 2 a year, and there's points in here where it's clearly more than that. So, I don't. I'm very cautious whenever we're talking about any aggregate numbers we're pulling together. But if you want to just say operationally, how much is it possible to extract every year? You get to 100, certainly. You get to 200 pretty easily, and so sure, doubling 200 to 400, 300 something. It's not ridiculous.
It's within reason. It's like, wow. So the issue that is then is I want to break for a second that I introduced this episode because we have not done this yet. This is episode 2047, Kurt. Hit like and subscribe and the buttons and all those things below, and leave lots of comments for us to read, and then we will continue on. So what I call your work, sir, I made this new word up yesterday at 1 a.m. and I could not go back to sleep, which is, it comes from these Austrian school. They talk about praxis, and your job is praxiometry, which is the absolute full accounting in a metric fashion for all human practices. That's just processing that.
Well, it's because I'm allergic to anything being used by the Austrians, which I consider.
I know, occupied territory.
Well, it's also pseudoscience.
Okay.
So I'm looking at that. Praxis just means reduced to practice, right? I mean, that's which means operationalized. And ometry means measurement, right? A measure. So measurements. So I mean, yeah.
Right. So I get one of these.
No, I mean, I can't argue with it, right? I mean, I just prefer to call it the science of decidability, you're whatever,
I know. I went for parsimony though then.
yeah, parsimony.
Sorry, Kurt. Wait,
Oh,
I-
I'm okay.
I was doing more
I'm not
research.
gonna object to the term, right?
Thank you. I'm doing more research.
And it helps me with P law,
Yes.
right? Because,
Distraction from.
well, I mean, I like the abbreviation P law, so I use P logic, P law, P's, you know, I can differentiate our operational terms from the traditional philosophical and
yes.
terms.
Right.
So I did like to use that, and well, I like it because it reminds me of P complete. And then I like it because it's the beginning. What I started with was the Hoppian reduction of all statements in social science to, or psychology and social science, to statements of property or demonstrated interest. So the more P's we have in there, I guess the
There you go.
so
There you go.
I just and I love the difference between praxeological and praxiometric, right? Because it is we're
We're
using
measuring everything.
not that.
That's the pure reduction of what it is, because measure everything that can be measured, ever.
Yeah, and then when you got to teach people what ordinal logic is now rather than cardinal logic.
Okay.
So.
I have one more thing, Kurt.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Just
I'm doing research on this.
I'm working on this right now and I'm overwhelmed by.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to bust you, Kurt, but working the buffer a little bit too hard. I'm working on that diamond. And I came across this premise that the male and if you look at the apex of the triangle, which is the cooperative potential between the male and the female, right? The virtuous apex. These are all via negativa, repulsive functions. We repel the things that are bad. Men repel the bad things. Men generate surplus and send it to the women to distribute. And the absorptive side is the female and the evil element are accepting attractions for the surplus repulsion repulsed by the males, distributed by the males to that side for their use. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I don't know where to go. I would use.
I don't know. I'm just making a noise.
No, you're what you're doing is what you generally do. It's what Luke is trying to do. What many of you are trying to do
What's that?
is you're trying to convert geometry to philosophy. And in other words, you're trying to reintroduce value judgments, your value judgments into the way you use the information. And I know you want to do that. I know everybody wants to do that. I know everybody's really wanted me to say, work on religion, work on philosophy, work on ideology. I'm like, I do science.
Right.
It only sounds like philosophy.
Yes.
It only sounds like ideology because it has political applications. It only sounds like religion because it has metaphysical presumptions of decidability over the long term. But it just sounds like those things. In the end, it's a value neutral language of ethics and politics. So when I look at that diagram, just like I look at any physical process, all I see is the subconscious male need to attain responsibility in order to demonstrate reproductive value, and the female desire to seduce in order to absorb resources produced by the males in order to reproduce. I don't see anything else. That's no different from there's a surplus carbon
Right,
in this molecule, and there's a negative charge. Oh, I'm gonna get this backwards. There's a charge over here that can fit a carbon, right?
right.
And so there's no difference. So there's the tendency and I'm not, again, I'm not criticizing you or anybody else. I know what y'all want, and it ain't here. The reality is that the minute you can put stuff in there, you can put a value judgment in there, but the minute you put that value judgment in there, I'm not sure we have science anymore. We might have philosophy, might have ideology. It's a similar problem to I am very proud of Luke's progress,
Yes,
because he is trying to do precisely that. I talk about rule. That's what I do. I don't talk about philosophy.
right. When you say talk about rule, what do you mean by that?
Decidability. To rule is not to govern. It is
Okay.
to decide, right?
Okay,
I'm just deciding. A
Right.
judge rules, he decides,
right,
right? It's just a balance scale, right? My broad job is rule. Government is a preference within that, whatever the rules are the government sets out, or the order government sets out, or the regulations government sets out. Problem with the word rule
yes,
is a preference. And
yes,
so, and then philosophy is a means by which you pursue preferences within a political system, within the rules. And so my rule is just scientific rule. I'm worried about government.
see.
I'm worried about religion. And I'm worried about education. But these are universals. They're not particulars. The individual needs a means of navigating the world.
Yes,
So what you look at Luke is doing is he's saying, okay, how do I apply this to the only power the average person actually has?
Right.
Parenthood. It's the only tribe over which the average person
has influence, yeah.
has influence. Some of us have influence over businesses we own or run. Some of us have larger businesses. Some of us have political responsibilities and territorial responsibilities, and some of us have geostrategic responsibility. But realistically, almost everybody is interested in a philosophy for how to, an ideology for how they would prefer the government operate, a philosophy for how they would achieve their ends, and a religion and get ready for the punch in the nose for means of tolerating it all.
Oh my.
So people want those things, but and I realize that when people hear me talk, they understand that I'm fighting for their interest, but I'm never fighting for their
Ideology or preference.
ideology, philosophical, their political ideology, their philosophical or religious preference. I'm fighting for, it doesn't matter what your preference is, because you're not the same. You're all different. And so I'm trying to fight for, how do I create natural law, in other words, scientific cooperation by a scientific law, scientific government, scientific economy, and scientific education, right? And to some degree, I have hope to produce a more balanced and less unscientific religion. Still Christianity, but, right? Or secular humanism without the communism. So I mean, these things are all possible, but people want that from me, but I don't, because that's not what a government needs. That's not what a state needs. That's not what a judge needs. What a judge needs is decidability,
Right.
not good meaning ideology, not preference meaning philosophy, not mindfulness meaning religion. The government doesn't need those things, because those people are not trying to find your own religion, philosophy, and ideology. They're trying to accommodate the fact that all of you need slightly different variations on those things. And what they need to have in common is, all I'm saying, what they need to have in common is reciprocity. right?
Mhm.
Right, that's it. So is whatever your choice is, just reciprocity, and then you can cooperate with other people. So, I mean, I want to tie this back to Luke. He was giving something yesterday, and Luke, if you're hearing this, it's obviously that I'm just, this is the fact that I'm referring to you as a matter of respect because I don't talk about people who are stupid. Right? It's that it is far harder. You can attest to this. It is far harder. I mean, we have a tendency to want to fit ideas into words instead of find words that fit ideas. Let me say that again. We have a tendency to fit ideas into words and to instead of find or make words that fit ideas. And so what I call that is called fitting. And all humans do it. They try to say this. Well, I mean, I love liberals. They're fucking hysterical. There's like the Department of Inconsistency department. Right? I mean, you know, it's like if something means something today that doesn't matter because all we really want is the emotional regulation attached to animation. So we're going to redefine it as this. So that's this thing is it right. So they don't use measurements, right? They
Oh my
use
God.
loadings.
It's this. It's like, hey, we're going to redefine what from the 70s they redefined depression so that they created the term recession to redefine it so that it didn't seem so bad, the thing we suffered in the 70s. And it's like, we can't call it recession. We have to redefine recession because we're not going to call what's happening.
Although I want to be honest, like I've been doing this. I feel like in my mind I'm still 19.
Yes, sir.
Right, or maybe 14.
Right.
Really. I'm just going to preclude all the women in my life who will say no, it's really 14, maybe 11. Right. But I've been playing this economic game really since the 70s. Right. The politics since the early 70s, economics since the mid 70s. I became conscious of economics under Nixon, the Nixon Carter thing. When I was still a kid, right? So is that this game, it's not a recession. It happens every fucking time. Let's just be honest. All right. Right. The difference is nobody ever believed anybody.
Wait. This time is different, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. But the difference is that the Democrats have created this illusion, this social constructionism. It's the first time that anybody's ever believed them. Right. It's never been, the government was just saying this stuff before, right? It's not a recession yet. We all know it's a recession. All right, fine. What you're trying to do is you're trying to manage your expectations, make sure we don't panic and make it worse, because that happens, right? You can make a recession happen by eroding consumer confidence. So the government just saying, you know, it's not clear yet, right? Because we don't want you, if you've got any remaining consumer confidence, we want you to retain it because we don't want you to flip the bit, because we never know, right? You can get out of a recession accidentally, right? I mean, it just works itself out because the method of reorganizing the complex, messy, fibristic web of human cooperation across sustainable networks of production, distribution, and trade, you know, that crazy crap might go, okay, it worked.
Right, just it reconforms itself into a productive pattern that was unexpected. Yep.
That's not going to happen this time. Sorry. It's not happening.
No, I think this is interesting. Is like this one is like really the credibility of the people that are trying to generate the social matrix are they're weakening. The field strength coming from the powers that be is degenerating as the 20th century lies come home to roost.
Right. It was. So can I want to run with that? Is that all right?
Please.
So, you know, it is my tendency, I am definitely aware of my tendency, to look at the causal origins of something and leave the blame there. In other words, I look for first principles, so I look for causal origins. So when I see the Marxist postmodern, Marxist, neo-Marxist postmodern, PC, woke, anti-white, anti-Western, anti-male sequence evolve, I know where that started. I mean, Lindsay is the freaking master of this subject.
Oh my.
And so it's well documented. We know it. I mean, obviously, Kevin McDonald has documented it thoroughly. I don't know why I think Lindsay doesn't cross the line and McDonald did. And so McDonald gets suppressed, even though he did it all first. And then Lindsay doesn't cross any lines, so he gets away with it. I, of course, as I've been told lately, repeatedly, I'm the asshole in the public intellectual discourse.
Who said
So
that?
everybody, including you. So,
Shocked. I'm shocked.
I'm shut down because I'm the asshole that tells the truth without obfuscating it. But shit, where was I going?
Lindsay McDonald. Lindsay.
So I tend to look at the causality of a thing. Now, the problem is that, you know, I mean, a certain, I can't remember which, I think it was, I can't put it clean. I think it's it was Archbishop of Boston, but I could be wrong. Said the problem with television, it puts a Jew in every household. And what he meant by that is a huckster.
That was wicked. Oh my.
Well, back when the church could say shit like that was when the church was valuable. Right. So he's well, what he meant was huckster. Yes. Right. I mean, it's immoralizing. So then the problem we get is we get the incentives behind the media, especially the 24-hour news service started by CNN, right? When they went 24 hours on cable. Because I remember the news beforehand, and there was this, because there was so few of these guys talking, right? I mean, the Walter Cronkite era, you know, there was a certain credibility they had to depend upon against each other. But when you get a big market, you democratize a market, which means you reduce it to the lowest common denominator. Yes, that's what democracy means, lowest common denominator. So they democratize it. So what happened is the incentives in the industry are to increase the number of people and in relation to the amount of time they're on in order to sell 7-minute segments with, you can't actually tell people anything valuable that way. So we went from priests to newscasters.
Yes.
To The View.
Oh my Lord.
And okay, so this has been great, this degeneration of you know, because and if you look at the rise of the academy comes out of the priesthood, right? It comes out of the church. So the academy, and this is what I dig on professors for a little bit, is they're preaching, right? They're doing a little too much preaching, and that kind of makes me crazy. And so you know, we went from priests to professors to over time. But what happened is the media degenerated as the attention span attached to it and the time space filled up. So what happens, of course, is that in any democratic process, you will move from the most intellectual content, which is the rarest, right, with the most refined, where the competition is, to the most democratic, which is the most impulsive. So that's what's happened, is we've caused a degeneration in the distribution of information. And so not only that, as our teachers used to be people with life experience, and now they're bimbos from the bottom 16% of the class. Right?
What was the distinction? You said impulsive was on one spectrum. What is the other end of the spectrum?
Rational. It's
rational, right? Yeah. Okay.
So it's basically information density, right? You have the simple people at the bottom who need emotions, and the people at the top who need synthesis. Really, that's what you're trying to produce as a newscaster, right? A newscaster, someone who's doing his job as a reporter, which should be what the equivalent of the 6 o'clock news, should have spent the day integrating the news stories, right? The news that happened that day or over the past week into a stream of narratives that we're tracking.
That's right.
So I mean, a few places do this. I don't keep track of them, but keep track of what are news cycles. So if you looked at the news cycles, right, what you would see is degeneration. In other words, they're actually lowering the quality of content of information along with the time preference of the audience. They're dumbing it down. and they're telling people what they want to hear. Why? Because in order to keep someone's attention when it's high quality content, they have to want to learn. But they have to want to learn because it's the only source of learning. The minute you flip that around and say there's a lot of sources of learning, most of them are really, really bad, which is what's happening with the internet, right? Because basically everybody's a source now. And that's not always true. Obviously, we have great people emerging from it, but in general, what's happened with the mass production of media outlets is that they have to capture your attention by making you feel good or making you self-righteous or making you morally outraged. So they tend to try to make you feel superior, and that's how they hold your attention. And they make you hold superior by one way or the other. So one of the ways is to explain things in your terms that would most positively reflect those terms for you. So what's happening is they're capturing attention of people by less and less helpful means and more deconstructive means. And so this is going to appeal to the bottom. So we have a race to the bottom in information distribution, which is, again, I'm going to say is a Hayekian who treats knowledge, right, in society as an asset, and who treats falsehood in society as a crime, or he treats baiting into hazard as a serious crime, a treason or a sedition, then I'm going to interpret these things quite differently. What should happen? It should be very highly paid job to speak to the public in public, and you should be required to ensure whatever it is you say. If that happened, the number of journalists we would have would be small, and the number of fact researchers would be huge, and very few people would say anything that was nonsense. Because like redefinition, a word is a weight and measure, right? All language is measurement. It's constructive measurements. That's what it is. All language is all terms are a weight and measure. When you redefine a term, you put a weight on the scale. Now, how do women do that? They do loading framing because they're not worried about consistency. They're worried about emotional transfer. They just need a vehicle for transferring emotions. And so that's what the left does. Sorry, I thought I'd be useless today, and I'm sort of off on a rant here.
Well, I'm sorry that you thought you would be useless. I was certain you wouldn't be useless, sir. Wait, and it's like, so you just pointed to praxiometrics again with the language is the metric.
Yeah, this is one of those times that I'm like, fuck you, you're right again, but I don't want to, I
don't want to dwell on it.
I get really, yes, you do.
No, I don't. I really don't. I just am pointing it out.
But I want to dwell on it because it makes the audience laugh. It makes me laugh. It makes me funny.
Good. Jovial is good. But
being an asshole is tiresome.
I know, and it's no. It's not
really.
trouble.
People. I don't know what you got to look at me in 10th grade. You know what? I have a wooden block of sketch pad of paper.
Nice.
And I'm out there on the lake drawing trees and houses and stuff. That's my inner child, right? Right. When I was 5, I'm running through the fucking cornfields thinking that this is the greatest. Of course, I get lost once in a while, and sometimes that's dangerous. But, I didn't want to grow up to be serious. Somebody has to, though, because these fucking people like children.
I know. I understand your point. It's like the criminality is so great. It's simply appalling. It needs to be put to an end.
And it's the Catholic Church works. The Catholic Church worked on me, and that whole teaching you morality, the way they do it. I mean, I never bought any of the religious stuff, but the point got made.
Right.
So, and my family's also very puritanical, so that didn't hurt either. But,
right.
So but you get out in the world, and I realized for me it was mostly a class conflict. So I was raised as the last generation of a certain class.
Right.
And I went out in the world only to find out that class was no longer dominant. It had become an underclass.
Yeah, it appears that the functionality of it has been that the elements of that class have migrated into shepherding and manipulating the lower classes to their benefit at the expense of the middle.
Yeah, that's the Boston thing. That's the combination
Brahmins,
of
right?
Brahmin and the Jews in New York. And that those two groups, I mean, when they say to you, but you'll hear this if you'll go back in the literature, what's the difference between a what's the Scottish religion?
The Protestant, the Presbyterians.
Presbyterian and a Jew. There isn't any. That's where this comes from. The fact that during that time there was very little difference. Like I have a Jewish family that I'm right. I talk shit, but I mean, you got to understand that I have Jewish friends too, right?
Right.
People really matter to me. I have a rabbi who I have a deep personal love for, and I think it's probably pretty reciprocal, right?
Right.
And I'm talking to this guy and talking to these guys, and I'm like, it's not. I'd rather spend time with them on a lot of time if they're of that caste, right? I mean, it's just a lower kind of aristocracy. And the only difference is if you look at that Jewish aristocracy and the white Anglo aristocracy, it's just how we look at the commons. And so like there's this more heroic do it for the commons Anglo-European and more heroic do it for status for Jews and the Jews. But I mean, their methods are pretty much the same. So that might be true, but I mean, I'm not part of that group. I'm part of the military wing of conservatism, right? I mean, my family's martial. I mean, if you don't need to, Jimmy Doolittle, who raided Tokyo, wasn't unique. I mean, if I go back on there's one of those every 3 generations.
That's just what they do.
It's just what my family does. So I'm part of that martial order, not this financial order, right? So which is very different. So anyway, where did I get onto this?
We were on the attention marketplace and we were talking about the defection of certain upper class to this Marxist functionality.
So no, I just think we gave up.
Gave up.
It just wasn't, there's no there is no, I mean, what they did is they used the Vietnam War to demonize the military.
Yes.
Right? And once you did that, that's the core of the West, is the male heroic military martial axis. So that's where the monarchy is, the military is, nobility. Nobility is built around military.
Right.
And the military is important because it's a demonstrated competency, not a credentialed one.
Right.
What happened was they pushed out the credentialed one, which was the church, and they took it over the academic one, which was largely Jewish. And the Jews are going to excel at credentialism because their skill is verbal, not operational. And so they're going to do that. And that's where you see them in all these verbal disciplines. And so what happened is relatively rapid replacement of Anglo-Saxon, Germanic, Dutch.
What's interesting is like really is replacement of competency in spatial functions is being replaced by competency in verbal functions.
Correct. Which is
the beta supremacy of the beta.
Well, what do you think my work is doing? It's restoring operationalism, right? I'm trying to get away from this verbal social construction nonsense. But the problem is that verbal stuff is most advantaged in baiting into hazard. So if you look at where the Jews have excelled, it's in those industries that allow them to bait into hazard, right? So it's not just credentialism. It's credentialism in baiting into hazard, right? Right. Because we do the opposite. We do demonstration and prohibiting hazard.
Right, but see, it's expensive.
What?
Demonstrating competence.
It's incredibly expensive.
And it's also it's very cheap to emotionally cause the impulsive to act.
Yes. In other words, you can bait bait people verbally bait people's impulses with verbal promises very easily, where it's quite expensive to actually physically organize people by material incentives, right? Especially in immaterial incentives like heroism, duty, and truth and excellence. Right? So, I mean, I'm an elitist, right? I mean, I'm absolutely positively an elitist, but it's not because because I have some fantasy for credentialism. It's just the opposite. I'm interested. It's called nat aristocracy because those are natural elites. And this is called not aristocracy because they're unnatural elites. They're credentialed elites. And so what I am trying to do, of course, is
They're
restore.
socially constructed elites.
Correct. It's just priesthood. I mean, there's only three ways of doing things. You either produce and exchange, you organize and force, or you organize by seduction and false promise.
That's right.
There's just only three ways of doing things. There's only three means of coercion. That if I wish I could. I mean, most of our followers, they get that. They're like, the triangle is incorporated in everybody's head now.
Right.
But for me, it was reading. Oh shit, his name just went out of my head again.
Sorry, Kurt.
He taught it. It'll come to me.
Yes, it will.
I want to say Johnson. He's Paul Johnson. He said there's only three means of human coercion, and he used moral, but I understood that was wrong. And so he's moral, physical, and remuneration, which was bribery or trade. But I'm like,
But moral breaks down into is social influence.
well, I mean, yeah, it's like good and bad, and it's good and bad.
It's what people call good and bad.
Right, good and bad, true and false, defense and force. Right. I mean, there's nothing truer than violence. I mean, it's the truest expression possible. It just isn't the one we want to have. We want to have reciprocity. Seduction into false promise is the most evil thing we can do, but that is evil, but it's incredibly successful, and the left is a master of it. And that's because the Abrahamic religions, both of the old world and the new, are the implementation of the female method of warfare by baiting into hazard. Because I love that it's coming out as like, who just said today that it's turning into the party of men and the party of women?
I did not hear that.
Republicans. I think it might have been.
I was talking to a dear friend of mine, that lady, and she's like this. She's like, where are the men? She's like, she's among the conservative women that are like, the women are out there doing the work, and it's like the men are being quiet because they're planning, sweetheart. She goes, okay.
All the men say the same thing. Just tell me to show up. Right. I mean, they all say the same thing. Is that the thing is that women are analog, and the left are analog, and the right is digital. It's a flip switch. The right comes, if the right flips its bit, it's just all over. Well, I don't want to, I mean, my inner voice says, kill them all, light them on fire.
Oh, Eli is the name of your inner voice. I have heard him speak.
It's my inner jerk, but realistically, I don't want any of that to happen.
No, it's the Genghis Khan methodology works. It does. It really does work.
It is really called, you don't come back. See, we didn't really we call the American Revolution a revolution, but it really wasn't. Because nothing changed, right? All we did was. What
was it then? How would you characterize that? That's quite interesting to me.
It's just a civil war. I mean, a normal civil war.
I guess it.
So
it's not quite a civil war.
Yeah, all that happened is in a civil war is you want to change in power. That's all.
Our arrangements have been changed.
Right. And so, but what's different? We still have the same law.
It's a secession. It was a secession. So I'm going to call it a civil war, but a secession.
Right. And so,
which is what the South attempted to do and failed. unfortunately, I suppose.
Unfortunately, it is unfortunate. It's too very
But
unfortunate.
I think that was the end of the Republic, the old Republic.
Of course it was. It was, and we're still paying for it. Anyway, the point I was trying to make by saying it was is that revolutions are really bad things. Secessions aren't. Civil wars necessarily aren't. But revolutions, when you've got to actually wipe out a caste and replace it, that usually creates disorder that you don't recover from.
Wait, so
It's
please
just
repeat that. Revolutions.
A revolution means you're going to wipe out a caste and the system of order that they put in place. Right? In other words, you're trying to replace what?
I see.
Right? A civil war is where you're just trying to replace the people in charge, right? All right, or in other words, you're trying to get control. And a secession is just that you don't want to change anything except that you need to be able to generate your own.
You need to be able to be on your own.
Right. You need to
you demand to be left alone.
Well, the real reason people separate is because the set of commons they need to produce. In other words, it's what a government does. It produces commons, right? A state holds assets. A military makes it possible to have a state. A state contains assets. A government is a means by which you produce commons with those assets. And a citizenry is a bunch of shareholders. And then the people who aren't citizens are something else. They're children of various ages.
Yes, right.
So now, so when you're in that sort of position, the reason you have secession is I don't have any problem with any of these rules. I have a problem with I can't produce what I want. Alberta needs to secede from Canada because it's in its interests, its people's interests, because Alberta has more in common with the plain states of America.
Right.
Newfoundland's only been part of Canada for, I don't know, not very long. I should know this. I don't.
50 years.
It's like
70 years.
It's there. It's not coming out, but yeah. And I'm like, well, you know, they should be there. They should be their own country or join up with Maine, which is where half of Maine is from.
Yeah.
So my ancestors included in Maine. So you have to separate insurrection, which is a demand for change, secession, which is I want to be able to generate my own commons, civil war, which is where I want to replace the governing class with right, and revolution, which is where I want to replace the whole fucking thing. So revolutions just don't work out very well. And this isn't, I did a lot of research on revolutions.
Yeah.
But I did that research back in like 2008. So I've sort of purged that. But it turns out that, I mean, the French Revolution is everybody's example, right? And the American Revolution, they're the worst freaking examples to use. Right.
That's interesting because it's like their names suggest similarity and they are not.
They're not at all.
It's like
and they're also really
secession versus a true revolution.
Right. And France has never come back from the French Revolution. It's never. It got Napoleon out of it. Napoleon was to Germany what the Byzantine Empire was to Rome, destroyed Europe the way the Byzantine Empire destroyed Roman Europe. So I mean, it's horrible. The French are horrible. They're still horrible today. There's a great video just got put out. I watched it while I was working yesterday, and I listened to it while I was working yesterday. And I think I shared it. Might have shared it on Twitter. But it's an example. It's why France has such a chip on its shoulder.
Oh my!
Right? Because they believe that they are something. They've always believed they're special.
Yes.
They're just women. French are manginas. So you see that? You hear that?
That was wicked.
If I can diss on the French,
there's just no holds barred. there's
I'm
no
49% French. So this on the front.
unlimited. Yes.
So they're horrible. I mean, and so they're still trying. So what France does is they're trying to prevent the restoration of the Holy Roman Empire, which is Germany as the core of Europe, by allying with Russia against the core. Except the Germans and the Slavs, the Slavs, not the Russians, but the East European, they get along great together. Why? Because Germany's basically what developed Eastern Europe. And
Yes.
Russia's what set it backward. And France is trying to ally with Russia to contain Germany, but Germany is what we need. Because France is authoritarian. And look at this clown. This guy's a clown. I mean, we got Biden. He's a clown, right?
Oh
But I
my
mean,
Lord.
it's that he's a clown
Oh.
because he's a clown. The French people since de Gaulle have all been clowns because they think they're just like Russians. They think they can restore the French Empire the way the Russians think they can restore the Russian Empire. Well, what we all want is the Germans and the Slavs, or the Central Europeans, to restore the Holy Roman Empire so that we can have a secure heart of Europe again. And the French can go their way, and Italy will incorporate it, and you'll have the French be the outliers like they were. Now, the only reason French was prosperous is because it's like Poland, it's the best piece of farm land on the continent. So Germany isn't. Anyway, I'm talking too much.
Shoot, man.
So
Go ahead.
I have no idea how I got here now.
We're talking about the three means of coercion. Then we were talking about the organization of from military through state to commons to citizens and others.
Mhm.
And then we were talking about the distinction between civil war, secession, and revolution.
Oh, okay, that's what we're talking about. So the reason and I say this 1,000 times, it doesn't do me any good.
Oh my, what a bad attitude.
Well, it doesn't, because it's like people pick on the most dramatic thing they can find. So I'm like, I talk about revolution because I want to make people understand not only can it happen, it's easy. And here's how it would work, right? I'm trying to show people that your belief that this can't happen, or that the American government, which claims 1 million soldiers, right? But how many does it really have? 100,000. Everybody else does stuff. But the biggest army in the world by orders of magnitude is the conservative men. It's millions. So, and those millions of people are in their homes. Now, if you want to see what the world looks like with checkpoints and cities starving to death by the millions, or power outages, the heartland doesn't care. So and if you want to know how to take out a big city, one of the reasons I got in trouble was showing how to do it to a certain city in the East Coast, right? I mean, because I just drew up maps and diagrams and said, here's how you do it. And right.
It's just an operation.
It's just another freaking project that's got to be done. And it turns out that it's really cheap and easy.
And making a map about it gets you in trouble.
Well, I mean, the problem is that my point is, that not only can this happen, it's this easy.
Yes.
Right. And so my point here is really obvious. Let's settle the goddamn problem. Right. I don't want to go through that. You don't want to go through that.
Well, I understand you. And I like this. This is where, when the Roe v. Wade thing came out, I'm like the Muppets at the other end of the good evil spectrum, from where I prefer to sit, are too stupid to avoid it. It appears that it's like this. It's like, okay, so I tell it to my patients like this. It's like, imagine 1955. We're gonna play chicken with cars. We're gonna be driving 1950, 1935, since they're gonna be old cars. We're gonna be driving 1935 Fords at each other until somebody swerves. And when you realize that you're looking out the window into the windshield of the other car and you see a crash test dummy, that's where we are. That's not has no agency. It is obligated to continue to the bitter end because they have to try.
Right, they can't tolerate any.
They can't admit defeat. They cannot accept responsibility for the lies that they tell. They have to run it to the bitter end.
Okay,
Sorry.
no. Anyway, so my point was, the purpose of my work is to provide, I said I would do 4 things.
Yes.
I would provide a moral license. I
Yeah.
no longer need to do that because everybody's got one. Everybody gets it now. Solution to the problem.
All right.
A plan of transition. And a means of causation.
There's a weight vest on the back of my chair. It's very heavy. My air conditioner man arrived and I heard him thumping about on the roof. I had to make sure I turned the air conditioner off.
Oh, I see.
I hope I didn't freeze it because that's what he was trying to avoid. I apologize. I missed it. So I got moral license.
You need a moral license. In other words, conservatives need to say, we need to do this because this is enough. You need a solution to the problem. I've provided that. You need a plan of transition. I'm not going to publish that. And you
Right.
need a means of causation, which is a means of causing it to happen, which is how did the course and conduct for civil war, which I'm not going to publish that.
No.
So I'm just focusing on, so I said I would produce those 4 things. I set out to do it, right? I mean, I just do my thing, I work, right? And it wasn't that, it was difficult. Those things were not hard to produce. What was hard to do is produce the science that produced those things.
That is the hard thing, and that's what we're trying to publish. Now, Kurt, I'm going to pause.
Okay.
Allow
So I
me
get
to interact with the workman on the roof.
I'm gonna coffee.
Yes, sir. Make it host. We're back again. Kurt's got his coffee. I've got the same coffee. I talked to the workmen and they're happy. I'm working. Those guys just, I want to say something about these work guys because it's like this specialization. Okay. I got the workmen in to look at my air conditioner because it wasn't cooling sufficiently in my house. And so I had these guys come in and it's so damned embarrassing because I have no competence as a technician for anything of such nature. And I'm like I have to demonstrate my incompetence in front of these guys. And it's just humbling to no end and embarrassing but the air conditioner in my house went from 77 degrees coming in to 60. And I'm like, that's out of the park, boys. That's
What they do, recharge it?
No, they just cleaned it and did a little bit of things and nothing much. And so it's like, but it improved the efficiency of it to such it was shocking and it was worth every penny because I couldn't have done it myself. I wouldn't have done it right. And I got trained on how to do some stuff and I gained new respect for the guy who has a 45 in his front seat of his pickup. Right.
I love the working man.
It's like that. He does his trick and he gets it. He was training another guy. It was very, it was interesting. And I was trained on how to do basic maintenance that will help me to do it. And it's like, here's what he wants me to do. I just go, yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. I'll make notes. I have them in my notebook here because I'm like, make notes.
People who don't have bullshit jobs. All right.
He has to produce. You can share your screen.
All right. So this is your
Yes.
diagram, right? So I just want to point out that we tend to draw this triangle with the apex at the top, right? Because that's
Yes.
more energy captured. But you'd want to flip this 45 degrees.
So it's on like a diamond on its side. Oh, I got you. So it's aimed it over to the side.
So that this line here is vertical. Can you see my pointer?
Yes.
This line is vertical. And that women are there. Because this right here, that's the male-female line. This one. Because males are distributed across this spectrum and women aren't.
Okay.
Men are
on a
hierarchical.
different.
Women aren't distributed. They're concentrated. So when you say that, here's the problem is this is force and defense, so means of coercion, and this is seduction and care, right?
Okay.
All right, and this is truth and reciprocity. Technically, this is neutrality.
It's just reality.
Well, I mean,
It's reciprocity at the apex.
reciprocity, right? So the thing is that men are distributed across here. When you say men do this proactivity, some of them do,
Right.
not all of them. Does that make sense?
Well, so I would argue that the men in this defense corner are a military, and they're
Yeah, you could say
a
this,
cost. They're a cost.
right, this is the trade is very direct, right? It's reciprocity is person to person. And defense is indirect. It's it's distributed, it's communal.
Because what we call the military will exist in this quadrant, this
Mhm.
triangle, and it's like, and it will be a trade that is made with the society writ large to provide defense for the markets and the commons that the people who organize that have provided.
Mhm. So my only point was, when you're talking about men, you're talking about this vertex, not this apex. When
Yes.
you're talking about women, you're talking about this apex. Or not
Oh,
this,
I see.
all right, that's all I'm
that's
trying to get across. Men vary, women don't. Which we know.
That's about the most rude thing I've heard all week. Because if you look, then it's like this. So this, you look at this lower triangle, and then it's the same thing on the right. Is that line systemic lying is men?
Yep. An empathic line. Empathic, inconsistent, unempathic, systemic.
Are the
right?
women on this from the
Sure,
apex
This-
down toward the evil apex?
this is women, right? This is
Yeah.
women. Yep. And this is men,
But this bottom line, there's bad men all the way down to evil.
right? That's why I say you have to look at it as a distribute, like an arc like this. Right?
Okay.
It might be useful.
Where do the women tend to cluster, right?
It depends on even the mean girls, they're down here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they're outgrouping other people,
The moms are up here, right?
right?
I don't know, you can't say. I'd have to show a different diagram to show clusters, because it's basically, okay, here's a person, I have this other somewhere else, but personalities do cluster in these same sort, but there's also one sort of in the middle.
Hey, I got a question.
Yeah,
Is this going to be able to be seen by the audience?
I don't know, it says I'm sharing it.
We'll see.
No, I mean, it works.
because we're not using the whiteboard, right?
Well, I mean, no, it works when we share the screen. They see
Okay,
it.
I'm just checking.
I shared last time we talked about it, they saw it, right?
Okay, I don't know. I just making sure we're on the right page, brother.
Anyway. So, blah, blah, blah. So, the fact that we're still discussing this bothers me.
Why?
Because where are women? Where is what about women? Where are men? Where was what aspect of men? If you talk about the positiva, it's up here. If you talk about the ordinary, it's in here. If you talk about the dishonest behavior, it's down here.
Yes.
People are all over the fucking place. So again, you want to say this is how you explain causality. So if I look at any individual, I might have slightly different biases depending upon, especially women, upon which kind of topic I'm talking about. Like
Okay.
I might be incredibly intolerant with my children and be incredibly gregarious
Mhm.
when we're talking about politics. Is this I'm not responsible for it. Flip it around, I might be very gregarious with my children and demand responsibility from others. So I mean, it depends where you're.
So it's like a field of potential operations that a human being will be able to be mobile within, depending on a social circumstance.
Right. I mean, the only thing
That makes
is,
total sense to me.
and these are just, brain organization and oxytocin, right? I mean, which is really kind of wrong. I guess that's not right, but this is, and we laugh a little
Yeah,
bit.
that is kind of what it is, though.
But this is a brain organization of testosterone. Fucking poor kid, some kid who's 2 years old. His father's been using T therapy gel on his shoulders.
Oh no!
Apparently, he doesn't wash his hands when he's playing with his
Oh
kid.
my
And the
lord!
kid's got a big dick and pubic hair, and he's
Oh my
like-
lord!
he's like as big as a 5-year-old.
Oh my lord!
I'm sure the guy's like, "What the fuck? What'd I do?"
Oh my! You got to be careful around the wife too.
Yeah.
Oh my! Anyway, so we're done with that. We're done with that. It's like that. Kurt, I took the day off. The reason I had the day open because I took the day off because I'm planning up a plan. I have a secret plan, which I'm going to share with you now, so it won't be so secret. But I'm going to make myself into some interviewer of some sort to interview people and chat with them about what they think is happening in the world and what they are doing in it and what they hope to achieve by it. Because it's like the interesting function to me, because you have a very clear idea about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what you're hoping to achieve in it. And it's like this.
If you understand the grammars, right, it becomes really clear. But these people don't. They don't get what language does. But yeah, so I understand a lot of stuff, really. It's kind of weird.
So it's like this. I want to talk to the philosophers because I'm very curious what they're thinking. They think they're doing, because they don't seem to be well focused and they're very agreeable about what they're doing, and they're not totally wrong about what they're doing. It's just like, what do they think they're achieving by the way they're doing it? And
can what they're doing succeed?
I can't see how it can.
No, but you have to ask them.
I will. That's exactly, because my opinion has no bearing on the conversation. I'm just curious what they think is going on.
I'll tell you what they find they'll do. I'm going to guess.
Okay. This is good. It's like
I
predictive.
run into this all the time.
Okay.
Some variation of we don't try to figure that out. Let's say
that's outside the scope of our interest.
Who was that? Peter, economist. Hold on, I'll think of. I love this guy. It's not really trying to pick on him.
Okay, so we won't say his name then.
Well, I mean, Peter Klein.
Okay, so we don't try to figure this out.
I just remember him saying that to me. Well, we're not trying to solve that problem, and I was so dumbstruck by the honesty and rapidity of the response. I was like, I think I need to leave now.
I've had my fill. Thank you very much. Because you're like dealing with someone who's apparently not serious, right?
No, they're serious.
Well, they think they're serious, but they're not serious if we don't try to figure this out. It's like children running around in the park.
it's not- they we can't look, let's like this. We can't look back in history and moralize about people in the past. Right?
Right.
Or judge people in the past. All right. You can say, well, that turned out to be a bad mistake, or you guys made a wrong bet early and that's just biting you all the way. Right. There's stuff like that. There's things that are incredibly selfish, unwise, egoistic, Putin's invasion of Ukraine, right? There's things like that. There are things like that. But when you look at people, we now have, I mean, you're exposed to this, right? Everything fits together like puzzle pieces. That's stupidly simple, right? So they don't know that. So we can't go back to these people and say, I mean, I do it because I'm just frustrated. I say, well, that's fucking stupid. Well, what I really mean is I'm frustrated about the state of affairs. I mean, right. But and I'm just expressing it in colloquial prose for
Yes,
humor,
yes.
for the sake of humor. But you can't go to these guys. They don't know this stuff. It's like going back into the 1600s and when they think about humors,
I know this is
and you're trying to tell them about bacteria.
it's
Right, I
so
mean,
rude. What you're doing is rude, man.
What?
Because it's like this. It's paternalistic, man. It's like it's okay. I'm not trying to judge the people. I'm just trying to talk to them about what it is that they think they're doing, because it's interesting. It is to develop an interview pattern that is trying to understand what they think is occurring. Because I think that we will all agree that the humanity is in a significant crisis, and we have a lot of problems that need to be resolved, and we have a limited time to get it done. And the question is the tools you're using provide sufficient explanatory power to understand the problems that humanity faces?
And offer a solution.
And yeah, then you can derive a solution from that.
And
And
how
it's
would
like-
that solution be brought about?
Right.
Because
And it's
that's
like-
where it goes to hell.
Well, it's like otherwise you're just fiddling around. And it's like, and I'm not going to say that to them, but I'm going to just, it will become evident, I think, by conversation, that it's because it's like, who's offering solutions? How are solutions to be derived? And to explain it to me, because I'm all ears. I will listen to you. Tell me how this is going to help, because I think that you're trying to help. You're seriously trying to help, but it's like, are you using the right tools, and are we having the right mechanisms in play to make it happen?
Mhm.
And that's and it draws attention to the answers that are productive.
Well, I'm gonna bet every one of them ends up saying, I don't fucking know,
Okay.
in one way or the other.
I know. I'm good.
No,
It's like that. So it's like
I know that's what would happen if I was talking to them. I know.
but it goes like this. So it's like this. So
Who does have an
wait,
answer?
so it goes like this. Ready for the, this is awful. It's awful. Ready for this? Because it's the follow-up question. It's once that I don't know card is played, why should anybody pay attention to you if you don't know, sir? Because I don't understand why you think that what you're offering is worthy of attention, since you don't claim to know.
Well, I mean, then after you have the first interview, nobody will talk to you.
Oh, is that it?
I would, who's a really good, I absolutely think this guy is horrible. And
Okay, who's this?
he does a video series called Closer to the Truth,
Okay,
and he panders to these people.
okay,
Now, he's your typical little Jewish nerd who wants to get attention and has found out that interviewing people is really way more fun than having a real job.
right.
So, and so what he does is he panders to all these philosophers. And I think it would be worthwhile for you to look at, it's incredibly important, because you've got to get out of that. You've got to ask them questions without ever coming to that conclusion you just stated. It has to be, it can be implied. But you can't get there. You just have to,
All but get there.
you have to all but get there and say at the end, so, you don't want to say, so who is gonna, how do you suppose we're gonna solve this problem as a people, as humans? How are we gonna solve this problem? And so you're trying to get them to the open-ended discussion, but you can't go in there and bait someone into an interview only to tell them they're full of shit. I mean, you'll get one interview and you won't get any more after that. So what you have to do is let the audience understand, right? And the more subtle you are, the better it is, right? And so what you're trying to do is say, collect the opinion of different people on how they think this problem will be solved. And their absence of the idea is absence of a solution and how that solution would be implemented and whether those people would tolerate that solution. Whether those are the questions you want to ask. And all you're trying to do is say, I'm trying to collect knowledge collect an understanding of what's out there. What are the big thinkers in the world think? You're going to be surprised at how shitty it is. Because I know.
I understand you. What masquerades as
right.
profound knowledge, right?
What they're really doing is saying, at least in philosophy, the reason to study philosophy today is to study law. And the reason is law today is stated as philosophy, not as science. And so what philosophy teaches you is human error. In other words, it's primarily not to do things right, but how to not do something wrong.
It's a good thing, but
right. So that's the only reason.
At least it's not a bad thing.
Study like academic philosophy.
Yeah.
The second reason is to study the history of the evolution of human thought.
Right.
This tells you a little bit about human beings. At the end of your journey, I promise you, it is a waste of your fucking time. If you read Aristotle and Plato, everything's a fucking footnote until you get to Smith and Hume, Darwin, and Darwin and Menger and Maxwell. I mean, it's just a complete waste of fucking time. So what you will find is what the historians all find, is the answers in history, not in philosophy. If religion is the childhood dreams of a god, philosophy is the adolescent dreams of man. And that's all. That's all it is. Nothing more.
I'll be right up. He's billing me. So I'm going to stop recording. Is that all right?
Yep.
So that nobody has to watch me write a check. All right, welcome back again. So we were just talking about philosophy, and I was trying to prime myself up to become an interviewer.
Well, you have the demeanor, you have the presence, you have the voice, all that great stuff. The problem it will be maintaining for the audience the impression that you're in control of the conversation and not lost. And secondly, that you're going to your enthusiasm will be gutted the first time it turns on you. And it's going to turn on you if you don't have a set of fixed questions to ask. At some point, after you've done 10 or 12, you'll discover that you've got it down. But what most people do, and this is just knowledge, is they go up and they swing for the They use enthusiasm to swing for the hills.
Yeah,
What I always do when I'm training salespeople, which is the same fucking thing, is as I take them to the 30 accounts that don't matter
that's right.
before I take them to one that does. Right. And if I have to train salespeople, I don't do it gently. I do 4 calls a day. And a sales call for me isn't showing up and talking about this new product. It's like I've got to interrogate the customer and whatever, explain what they're doing, try to understand the problems in their business, whatever, and analyze it. And then explain what kind of things we do and where we think we would fit, where we wouldn't be a fit. That second part being useful. The point is that everybody's enthusiasm is a measure of their ignorance.
Yeah.
If you're not nervous going in an interview because you don't feel you feel like you've prepared, but you're not sure what the other person will say, that's a problem. Somewhat like being a lawyer in a courtroom, you should have a vague idea what the person's going to say before they say it.
Yes.
So you'll notice that you can interview someone like Jones because you've read everything he's fucking written, right? Right. And you've known him for a long time. You've known about him and interacted with him a long time.
I've talked to him several times.
Right. So that's a fairly easy conversation. And you don't really disagree with them, really.
Not at all.
Right. And so that's an easy thing. There are going to be people who are going to push back against you.
Right.
The second thing that's happened is whatever you do with the first 3 to 5 interviews,
Yeah.
is people are going to try to categorize you. They're to put a label on you. Like some people tried to put the fundamentalist label on you at some point. I remember seeing something like that, which I thought was really funny.
Oh yeah.
All right.
That was interesting. I was like,
what?
that's weird.
It's like when I get the Nazi label, I'm like, you clearly don't understand what I do.
You missed something, right? You missed something.
You clearly don't understand. Just the opposite. So in any event,
I was going to interview some of the guys.
I wouldn't do that.
Okay.
I would focus on people that are outside of the group and try to, because what's going to happen is you'll discount your market value by interviewing people who are not of the same status.
Okay.
You want to try to stick up with the
Professors.
Mhm.
Because it's like this, because who's active on social media, right? And what are they doing? That's kind of what my curiosity is, because everybody's aimed at the same problems. What are the big problems of the day and how are we solving this? By what means?
We could make, I mean, Brandon's talked to Jordan Hall.
Yeah.
I'm fond of a lot of the center left guys, right? I mean, most of them are Jewish. They're talented. They're quite competent. I'm fond of a lot of those guys. What's the one running in California? What's his name? Schmattenberger.
Yeah.
These guys are all quite good. So, I mean, there's a lot of people you can interview who are worth talking to. If you got to talk to, say, some of the really established philosophers, I mean, I would go for, I'm not going to mention a name, but you have a philosopher you've established a relationship with. I would go for the midline guys, because if you were to go for some of the senior guys, they're going to walk you around in circles because they're trying to protect a brand.
Yep.
They're really to publish books. So that's probably a waste of your time. But for the people who are still serious academics or still trying to solve a problem, they're interesting to talk to. So I would shoot for that. I mean, like,
I want to generate some kind of a list of people then.
Right.
Okay.
And just again, just make, I really think you should make a list of questions. You should send me a list of questions. I'll try to help you out with some of them.
Cool.
Because there's a clear progression. You want to be able to follow it. You want to know what the follow-up questions are for each question. It's not like I haven't done a lot of this, right? So if you send me that, I can help you with it. And then just make sure that you know what you're going to ask. And then what I would do if I were you is, if you're going to talk to somebody, is jot down what you think they're going to say.
Okay.
Right. And then what you want to do is have some gimmies, which is, so like you said this, right? You said this, what does that mean? Right. I mean, you want to have some things that show that you've demonstrated knowledge of their stuff. Usually what happens when I get in an interview with somebody is, like, if I'm talking about their book, there's nothing, just like never a book I don't have something I don't disagree with. And most of the time I'm just trying to support that person. So I actually try to get off the subject when I'm trying to do that kind of stuff. So you're just trying to get them to do their own little bit of promotion,
Right.
talk about what they do. You're trying to say, what I'm trying to accomplish is to look at the state of affairs in intellectual thought and how the present intellectuals are trying to bring about, or might hope to see, the future and change. Because there's a lot of talking heads, and these talking heads tend to not be intellectuals, right? And we're trying to see what the serious thinkers think. That produces a venue for you to talk to academics about their things. And so you want to ask this fairly fairly consistent set of questions that follow an arc. The arc is, how do you perceive the problem? How does your discipline solve this problem? How do you, within your discipline, try to solve this problem? How would you bring about, what solution do you recommend among those, and how would you bring that into being, and what the challenges you think that? I think that's the whole thing. And you got to realize some of them are going to have no answer.
I know. That's all right.
And a lot of the time you're going to run into, like I said, well, I just try to X, which means I earn a paycheck.
Right.
All right.
Well, I appreciate Kurt. I had a good time chatting with you today, and even though it was fairly punctuated with interruptions, it was off the cuff because we decided to do this yesterday, and we're going to get back to lying again, I hope, on Saturday. Is that going to happen?
Yeah. I've worked on the epistemology table
Yes.
more, and what I'm crossing my fingers is that I can get the grammars transferred over.
Very good.
There's an intersection of those two things, and I can see it, and I can't quite put my finger on it. So, in any event, I've done quite a bit of work on merging reducibility with epistemology, and I think that it might take me a while to wring out the last bit of it, but that's pretty good. So we can work on that a little bit, and then we'll get back to then we'll try to reorganize the line diagram and the way we've talked about, and
perfect.
That'll be fascinating. All right, boss.
Well, thank you, Kurt. Have a good week, the rest of it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Leave some comments now. Bye-bye.